Hey, what's up guys? Dominic back with another video here. This time I'm going to be going over the Towers of Babel. And I'm going to be addressing the Smithsonian narrative here. If you watch these videos, they're going to basically say that the Jews, while in captivity in Babylon, came up with the story for the Tower of Babel. But they're describing a real tower. It's not false, but it's not very truthful either. A better word would be that the Jews borrowed from existing material to come up with their own narrative. But if you scroll down to the comments, there's people saying things like that the Tower of Babel story happened before Nebuchenezzar, which is who they say built the Tower of Babel. But we're going to go ahead and listen to the Smithsonian and this guy here read this stele, and we're going to judge for ourselves if the Smithsonian did a good job representing what's on the stele. And I went ahead and skipped ahead because they don't say very much throughout this whole video until the very end.
Text also reveals a detailed account of the tower's construction, and more importantly, how Nebuchadnezzar went about building it.
It reads from the upper sea, which is the Mediterranean, to the lower sea, and that's the Persian Gulf. The far-flung lands and teeming people of the habitations are mobilized in order to construct this building of the Ziggurat of Babylon.
Incredibly, this ancient account is identical to the biblical story of how the Tower of Babel was constructed.
So I'm going to go ahead and stop it right there. If you pay attention to what he says, he calls it the Tower of Babel, of Babylon, and only refers to Edemenanke. So we're going to take a look at these Nebuchadnezzar steles ourselves and see what they say. So this here is I copy and pasted it, and I just put it in a Google Doc for my own use here. But I'll post in the description where I got these sources from, so you can see I'm not just making it up. So let's go ahead and actually read what he read there and see if the Smithsonian covered this truthfully. Edemenanke, Ziggurat Babili, the house, the foundation of heaven and earth, Ziggurat in Babylon. And this is just basically a caption saying, I am Nebuchadnezzar, I'm king of Babylon, and this is my tower. He says, Nebuchadnezzar says, in order to complete Edemenanke and Irme-Menanke, I mobilized all countries everywhere, each and every ruler who had been raised to prominence over all the people of the world. Loved by Marduk, from the upper sea to the lower sea, the distant nations, the teeming people of the world, kings of remote mountains and far-flung islands. The base I filled to make a high terrace. I built their structures with bitumen and half-baked bricks throughout. I completed raising its top to the heaven, making it gleam as bright as the sun. So this is right here the most important part of this stele that they left out. Edemenanke, which is the one they showed and talked about, and Irme-Menanke, which I think I probably butchered the pronunciation, but it's also known as Borsippa, so I'm just going to refer to it as Borsippa because I feel more comfortable pronouncing that. Basically, what it's saying here, what Nebuchadnezzar himself is saying, is that there are two towers, and in order to complete these towers, he mobilized all the nations. So I think there's a bit of a discrepancy in what they're saying there versus what I'm reading, because they really paint the picture that it was just one tower. But if you could see here, he clearly refers to two towers. And you can look up Irme-Menanke. It'll bring you to Borsippa otherwise known as Birs-Nimrud. And Nimrod is the king credited with building the first tower, of course, and Nebuchadnezzar built it in his honor. So we're going to take a look at another inscription. These are Birs cylinders. I think they were found at Borsippa, and these were translated in the 1800s. So I don't know if these particular cuneiform tablets that these individuals translated are still around, but we're going to read their translations. And this is from Borsippa, the first tower, the one that Nimrod would have built. So one translation reads, "I am Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon. My great Lord has established me in strength and has urged me to repair his buildings. The Tower of Babylon I made and finished. The Tower of Borsippa had been built by a former king. He had completed 42, and they're unsure, cubits. But he did not finish its head. From the lapse of time, it had been ruined. Lacuna, the rain and wet had penetrated it into the brickwork. The casting of burnt brick had bulged out. Merodach, my great lord, inclined my heart to repair the building. I did not change its site, nor did I destroy its foundation platform, but in a fortunate month and upon an auspicious day, I undertook the rebuilding. I set my hand to build it up and to finish its summit. As it had been in ancient times, so I build up this structure." So basically what he's saying there is, in order to repair the buildings of his Lord, who he names Merodach, and Merodach is basically Marduk, or he is Marduk, it's another name for him, who is the chief Babylonian god. It's for him that Nebuchadnezzar does this in service of. Okay, because according to Nebuchadnezzar, the first one was never built. Never finished, I mean. It's important to note that his great lord, who he refers to as Merodach, was the one building the tower, is what it makes it seem like. Okay, so basically what you have going on here in Babylon, and one of the reasons it's so bad, is because they pretty much worship humans. All right, Merodach is basically Nimrod made God, right? And you can get into who Nimrod was. He probably was Enmerkar. Here's another translation by one of his colleagues of the same cylinder. It says, "The most ancient monument of Babylon I build and finish it. A former king built it, they reckon 42 ages ago. But he did not complete its head. Since a remote time, people had abandoned it without order, expressing their words." Okay. Now, they're describing Borsippa there. And Borsippa is known as the Tongue Tower. That's what it translates to. And it was built in honor of Nabu, who was the son of Merodach. And he was the god of writing and wisdom and literacy. So it's very interesting that Borsippa, which would have been the first tower, right, according to here, Ir-Menanke, because we know Edemenanke is the one built in the 6th century. So this one is the one built 42 ages earlier, or whenever. Definitely earlier. So we have the first tower here, which is the Tongue Tower, dedicated to Nabu, which is the one that's being described where people had to abandon it because they weren't able to speak. Now that may have happened with Edamananke. They don't really know what happened with it, but I will say that the land of Mesopotamia in general is pretty much referred to as the land of multi-tongue people, I think, which basically means that each city-state had its own dialects and its own ways of speaking. But one of the languages that may have been confused, there was a unifying language in Mesopotamia that everyone could understand, and it is cuneiform, which is connected to Nabu, right? Because he is the god. They say he's invented writing, but we know he didn't. We know Enki is the one credited with writing, but as the Babylonians attempted to gain more power for their ruling class, they, put Merodach here as their chief god, and thus his sons, like Nabu, became prominent. So anyway, with cuneiform being the unifying language of the land that not necessarily everyone could understand, but the people who were literate could all understand it. With that being the written language that unified everyone, I think that a important story in the Mesopotamian lore would be Enmerkar and the Tale of Arata, which is basically a back and forth between the king Enmerkar, who many associate with Nimrod. He's having a back and forth with the Lord of Arata, who some say is Noah. I don't know. I wasn't able to verify that. And basically, the whole time, the Lord of Arata is saying, why should I accept the word of you? Basically, why should I accept your authority? Which could be another interpretation of what it means to have the language confused, not recognizing the word of the king. But at the end of the story, Enmerkar decides to send a clay tablet inscribed with his demands or whatever. And when the Lord of Arata sees it, he calls it nails, insinuating that he couldn't understand the cuneiform that was written. Now, they'll say that this was the first instance of writing, but that doesn't really make sense, because if you read the story, it basically seems like if that was the case, he just invented writing on the spot, which is not the case, I think. It may have been the first time that they sent written messages between city-states, but it was not the first use of cuneiform. But here's another translation here of a cuneiform tablet, and I put here lost to the British Museum because it was translated by a dude named George Smith in the 1800s, and it's not to be seen again. So unfortunately, this is the only translation of this particular Assyrian tablet, or I don't know if it was Assyrian, but it was found in the library of Nineveh. And it reads, Lacuna, them, the father Lacuna, of him his heart was evil. Lacuna against the father of all gods was wicked. Lacuna of him his heart was evil. Lacuna, Babylon brought to subjection. Small and great he confounded their speech. Lacuna, Babylon brought to subjection. Small and great he confounded their speech. Their strong place, the tower, all the day they founded. To their strong place in the night, entirely he made an end. In his anger also word thus he poured out. Scatter abroad he set his face. He gave this command. Their counsel was confused. Lacuna, course he broke. Lacuna fixed the sanctuary. And he goes on. This is him talking about his translation. He says, we have the anger of the gods at the sin of the world, the place mentioned being Babylon. The building work is called Tazamot or Tazamutu, a word meaning strong. There is a curious relation to lines 9 to 11. that what they built in the day, the God destroyed in the night. And I do think that there are some strong parallels between the Tower of Babel story and the Twin Towers that were in New York. I personally think that they pretty much were built in honor of these Babylonian ziggurats in an effort to really signify that the United States is Babylon. And if I'm not mistaken, I'm willing to bet that New York is probably one of, if not the most diverse cities on the planet, with all these different cultures and ethnicities living there, similar to what Babylon would have been. So, and another thing too is, you could say that, you know, since it's from the 1800s, it's from a time when archaeology was trying to prove the Bible was true. So it may not have some legitimacy, and I'll give you that. But again, this cuneiform tablet is lost to the British Museum. We'll probably never see it. And it's basically talking about a tower that was built and the languages were confused. And the tower, he made an end, it says. So here is a tablet found in Nineveh that clearly predates when the Jews were held captive in Babylon. So this narrative that the Smithsonian paints is very disingenuous, because there's stories of this all over. And I'm going to even get to an American story that talks about the same thing. But I want to go over Herodotus' account of the Tower of Babylon. He says, in the middle of Babylon's precinct, there was a tower of solid masonry, upon which was raised a second tower and a third, and so up to the eighth. The ascent to the top is on the outside by a path which winds round all the towers. On the topmost towers there is a spacious temple. There is no statue of any kind set up in this place, nor is the chamber occupied of knights, but of any one but a single native woman, who, as the Chaldeans, the priest of the god, affirms, is chosen for himself by the deity out of all the women of the land. So essentially, it's totally for Ishtar, right? Because this is who the woman represents. This woman would basically be the goddess incarnate. And Herodotus, I think he would probably say that this woman, at least in ancient Babylon, because Borsippa would be the ancient Babylonian ziggurat and Etemenanke would be the Neo-Babylonian ziggurat. In the context of ancient Babylon, Herodotus would probably call this Semiramis. And whoever this woman would have been during Nebuchadnezzar's time, I don't know, but she definitely would have been the goddess incarnate. However, right here, he pretty accurately describes how the tower is built. Right? He describes it being stacked on top of each other up to the eighth stone. But the eighth, it's more of like a crown. We don't really know what this would have been, but it probably would have had some type of purpose beyond what they'll give the ancients credit for. Here is the American account. Now, I had some trouble really finding it. This is from the Kaskin people. They're very small. There's not very many of them. But let's just see what they have to say about the tower. A great darkness came on, and high winds which drove the vessels hither and thither. The people became separated. Some were driven away. Long afterwards, when in their wandering they met people from another place, they spoke different languages and could not understand one another. Now, this story will go on to mention that there was a tower that these people were trying to unify themselves other, and there was a strong fear of the humans being scattered over the earth in this account. But I put this down, Cholula, because Cholula is the pyramid that they say this myth would be based off of. Now, I don't know if that's true. I think that regarding the American account, there's two possibilities. Number one is that you had very similar events going on in different parts of the world. Maybe not at the same time, but similar events did occur in America and in the Middle East. So that's one possibility, that these were two different events happening, probably over vast distances and times. The second possibility, I would say, is that they're describing the same event that these people would have gotten from their god, who is Quetzalcoatl, who people will connect to Noah, or he definitely, if he wasn't Noah, this individual, whoever is Quetzalcoatl, would have definitely had some connections to this land, the land in the Middle East, and been there during the time in order for these people to so accurately remember these events. Okay, so again, here's an American account. I showed an Assyrian account, and here's an American account of a tower that confused people's languages. So again, this is not the Jews coming up with this. It's just not. Now here I'm going to show you where these places are on the map. They're in a place called Hilla, Iraq. And here is Neo-Babylon here, this area. Here is the site of Edamananke. And if you watch the Smithsonian video, that in one of them, the guy is standing right outside this area. So this is what they're talking about. It's not there anymore. They really don't know what happened to it. It is precisely 11 miles from the other ziggurat, Borsippa. So the two towers are exactly 11 miles apart. And here I'm going to tell you what was going on with the Jews. They were living here in this area, Neo-Babylon, as slaves and captives. And they would have seen Edamananke. They would have seen this one here. Okay? However, through the myths and lore of Babylon, they would have learned of the events of this tower here 11 miles away. So while they're physically describing Edamananke, the one in Neo-Babylon, the events they're describing are about this one here, Borsippa, which again translates to tongue tower and was built in honor of Nabu. So, I personally think that it's very deceptive on the Smithsonian's part to make it seem like there was only one tower and it was built here, while completely ignoring Tongue Tower over here. Even when it's mentioned, it's specifically mentioned right here in the very own stele that they read, and they just left it out. So this is where the tower or towers of Babel are. They're here in Hilla, Iraq, and there's two of them. You could say, if you want to draw connections between the World Trade Center, this one would be the Tower of Light, and this one would be the Tower of Darkness over here. But to Nebuchadnezzar, they were both important. Okay, and here's some pictures of them. Here's a picture of Borsippa, the original. And I want to point out, I did not notice this, I read it, that it looks kind of like an anthill or a termite mound or even a wasp's nest. Okay? Now, if that is the case, we'll take a look at Edamananke too, what it may have looked like. Now, if this is the case, that this is actually what they were built to resemble, then that would definitely make the Babylonians the bad guys. And here's the Genesis version. What God did in the Genesis version would totally be justified. Because basically what it symbolizes is hybridization, which is what God was against. That's why he wiped out the earth through the flood to get rid of the Nephilim, who were hybrids. And here, with these towers, it's basically a hybridization between the organic and the inorganic. Okay, and I'm going to read this. We'll get into the Genesis biblical account here. And the other Genesis accounts from the Torah and the Quran, they have details as well, not mentioned in the Bible, that should be considered. I'm not going to read them here. I'm not going to read them here, though, because I think that the Bible version does a pretty good job. And it says, "And the whole earth was of one language and of one speech, and it came to pass as they journeyed east, that they found a plain in the land of Shinar, and they dwelt there." So Shinar is Iraq, right where I was showing you. "And they said to one another, 'Come, let us make brick and burn them thoroughly.' And they had brick for stone, and slime they had for mortar." Okay, so basically what this was here is, this is mass production, like literally like a factory. They would have these huge buildings that were like ovens dedicated to burning the bricks thoroughly. Okay. And these bricks, they were uniform. They all pretty much looked the same, and there were millions of them. The number I heard was over 15 million bricks used to build these towers. Maybe even more. It continues, "And they say, 'Come, let us build us a city and a tower with its top in heaven, and let us make a name, lest we be scattered abroad the face of the whole earth.' And the Lord came down to see the city and the tower which the children of men builded. And the Lord said, Behold, they are of one people, and they have all one language. And this is what they began to do. And now nothing will be withholden from them, which they purpose to do. Come, let us go down there and confound their languages, that they may not understand one another's speech. So the Lord scattered them abroad from thence upon the face of all the earth, and they left off to build the city. Therefore was the name of it called Babel, because the Lord did there confound their language of all the earth, and thence did the Lord scatter them abroad the face of the earth." So there's two ways to interpret this. Number one, philosophically and historically. Philosophically, you as an individual are the tower, and it's up to you to stick your head into the heavens and have your feet rested firmly on the ground, just like a strong tower. And this, it's basically, it doesn't say it here, but the way to achieve that is just basically to follow the example of Jesus. By doing that, you will essentially be a spiritually grounded person and a powerful person right there alongside what Jesus was capable, because you have awakened your inner Christ. In fact, Jesus even says in the Bible that we as individuals will be capable of doing what he did, possibly even greater things. So this is definitely can be interpreted as philosophy, that we are these strong towers, or we're like these temples for which divine energies or God power flow, right? And this is basically what your inner Christ is all about. The second way to interpret this is the historical perspective. Okay, now I'm going to tell you why the Babylonians were so bad, according to the Bible, and even now. It's because they wanted to basically unify the whole world in one world order type scenario. Very similar to how you hear the elites talking about the new world order. This is what the Babylonians wanted, but they wanted their order. They wanted the whole world to essentially submit to them. And right here, this is what it's all about. Merodach. And remember what I was saying. Merodach was the former king who built Borsippa. Okay? So basically what this is saying here, according to these translations, is that Merodach was a person who later became God. Essentially, Babylon worships people that they deify. All right? And they do this to justify their own rulership, their own kingship, so that they can essentially try to dominate the world, which is pretty much what the Tower of Babel was. Okay, now, in terms of hybridization, you know, they basically wanted people to submit to them very much like an insect hive mind. It's even described here with one language, one city, one king, right? Very much like an ant colony who they follow pheromones, and they follow the queen's pheromones. They tell them what to do. Well, here, they're using technology to accomplish that, and they're using this perverted tower, which does look a bit like an anthill, to symbolize that. Okay, and I'm going to show you something here. This is the next picture. If you don't understand how bad Babylon was, maybe these pictures here will show you. So here are trees that are barren. Okay, and here's some cuneiform talking about why these trees are barren. So let's go to this translation here. It says, this is the translation of the cuneiform here. It says, of Nebuchadnezzar, king of Babylon, palace of the summer, beneath the furnace. So basically what it's saying is, whatever made these trees barren came from the palace of summer beneath the furnace from the king of Babylon. And as I talked about here in Genesis, it shows you that they had mass production, right? They had literal entire buildings dedicated to burning these bricks. So what could have possibly caused all this destruction? Well, this. Now, I don't think I need to even mention what this is. I think it's pretty obvious what's going on here. All right, but I want to say that there is a possibility that this could be misinformation on behalf of mainstream academia or whoever found this, because this is considered legitimate. Okay, and there's other pieces on this little thing here that demonstrate this. So this is pretty much what Babylon's all about. They're all about forcing people to submit to a central authority, which is ordained by the king. Ordained by the gods. And as I pointed out here, their kings were the gods, literally. Literally people deified, trying to force people to conform to their what would essentially be a human hive mind. Okay, so this is why I think God went there and put a stop to what was going on. Okay, now I want to show this Okay, this is it here. All right. Now, it's not really, oh, excuse me. It's not really a tablet. It's like a little cylinder that you roll on clay.
Seal. It is in fact a carefully wrought container housing cryptic instructions.
It's kind of like Russian dolls. And you see, you roll it on the clay, and it will imprint the image.
With an imprint of the...
And this is what these imprints are on that thing. Okay, and it's like I said, it's kind of like Russian dolls. This is the first one. This is the second layer, and then this is the third layer. The third layer, of course, being the juiciest. But this is basically what happened with the Towers of Babel. As described in Genesis, you have two towers. The Jews are describing the original, or they're describing Edamananke physically. They describe how it's built. They provide its physical descriptions. And but for the other one, they're describing the events of Borsippa, which is Tongue Tower. And I went over what these events were here in this account, the American account, this cuneiform account from Nineveh, and this translation of the Birs cylinders, and even also Enmerkar and Narada. So something happened basically to put a stop to this. Now again, I don't know if this is real or not. It could be misinformation, but regardless, I think it accurately depicts what Babylon is all about. So thanks for watching, guys. I hope you enjoyed my video, and I'll see you guys again.